Uh, Hello guys, good morning or good afternoon in YouTube. I'm gonna read to you guys the uh, chapter 1 of the book, and I hope you're gonna enjoy it, and I'll try my best to finish it clearly with you. And I hope you have to be patient with me reading this book, okay? After my father Horacio Alejandro Biga died on August 23, 1987, my mother Miranda Legaspi Castillo had to move on. For all of us, for me, Sophia Vega, my brother Flavio, and our sister Hannah, Ella, Eliza, Chelsea and her two grandchildren, Franco Diego Vega, and Holibella. One day at the house where we lived 3 months following the death of my father, I noticed my mother seated on the wooden chair by the window, looking out at the vast morning sky and smiling. He waved me over to join her and keep her company. I walked over to her and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Her face seemed cool from the misty morning air. Dewdrops from the trees which surrounded our house dripped into my skin. He took my hands and asked me to sit next to her, pointing to a lone chair near on the veranda. As I moved the chair closer to her, I noticed that she had not changed over the past month. She was still so beautiful. I smiled and said, "Mama, what are you thinking? Tell me what is in your mind right now? You look so happy today. Compared to the last a little while, I'm just wondering why." Still smiling, he looked over at me and smiled and replied, "I just remember a love story. It's so beautiful, and it's the love story of your father and I." I saw his hazeled eyes twinkle in the brightness of the morning sky as I motioned me to sit even closer to her so that she could hold my hands while she talked. With her other hands, she patted her heart and gave me a look of satisfaction, saying, "I will tell you how a young version of this woman fell in love with a man called Horacio. She was so beautiful, even after all these many years, with her signature long luxurious hair flowing past her shoulder. I noticed some gray spot when she moved while she talked. I could tell from her passion of wanting to share her story with me that she really missed my father. My own heart aches for her." Her gracefully smiled at me, took a moment to gather her thoughts. Then she began to talk if things were just happening again. By the beginning, the first time your father saw me and his eyes followed me as I walked towards him and slowly passed him by. My hair flowed down my back, sway in time with my hips as I moved past him. I could feel he stare at me. It was obvious. I almost laughed at him but held in until I will pass him, leering eyes. Some girls who stood near your father decided to tease him. They said, "Who is that girl, Horacio?" Well, of course they knew, because they were my girlfriend and cousins. She had been talking non-stop about me ever since he arrived in our village. He answered the girls because he did not know them better, and spoke in a dreamy voice. "Her name is Miranda Castillo." My name had crossed over the lips of the most people in the village either out of admiration or envy. Your father had just completed his master's degree in teaching and decided to spend time at his uncle's house for the holiday before the beginning of his new career as a teacher. He could think of no more way to pass the time than by watching me walk along that dirt road to and from school. After weeks of watching me uh, pass the Uncle Farm's house, your father happened to finally meet me at one of my cousin's party. He arrived at the house and followed a sound of loud music and boisterous laughter outside the courtyard. The heavy night air was lightened by the sweet scent of sampaguita flowers in the nearby garden. I looked myself away from my mother's story to imagine a white flower, wondrous smell, and I inhaled it in and out. If only in my imagination. My mother continued with her story. In the days of old women who could not afford the luxury of buying bottled perfume would crush a fragrant white petal of sampaguita flowers, mixing it with oil, then massaging it into their skin. His skin lured many men, including your father. When he made his entrance into the house, he noticed me straight away. I was sitting in the far corner of the courtyard, surrounded by a group of female friends I met that night at the party. I could see that he desperately wanted to speak to me, but he waited and took his time, slowly working his way through the crowd, pushing to say hello to the old friends and relatives, patting them on the back or briefly shaking their hands. He gave me impression that he was focusing on each and every one of them, on the people he was talking to, but never left the corner of his eyes looking at me. I watched him as he watched me. As he got closer and closer to me, I could see that he was posturing for me, trying to look important or athletic. My mother giggled with the remembrance of the first meeting. I smiled at first and giggled and smiled at first and then joined my mother in a good laugh. I said, I can just imagine my father trying to look more important than he was at that time anyway. My mother continued, although your father was a short instructor, he made up of any lack of a height as his infectious personality. His energy was so contagious. He automatically drew people closer to him. Just a perfume skint of sampaguita flower drew men to the women. Horatio was a sort of man that everyone just wanted to know and be around with. He had a gift of he has a gift of putting people at ease and making whomever he was talking to feel like they were the only people in the room, and thus include me. There was a little sweep of atmosphere when your father strolled into the courtyard and began to make his way towards me. I could feel warm breeze blowing across my skin, which made my hair and my arms stand at attention. My heart fluttered as he got closer. Even though I was surrounded with a group of chattering friends, their voices quickly faded into the wind, and the only sound I could hear was the clicking of his footsteps as he approaches me. My heart began to beat faster and my face began to flush from the anticipation. Although I was locked in the gaze, he only really came into my line of vision as all my friends backed away and allowed him to approach me. Although I was your father's distant feature came into my focus as he came closer to me. I could see my future through his eyes. My heart-shaped lips parted slightly to reveal the knowing smile full of promise and hope. My mother took a drink of her tea, shaded her eyes from the sun, and continued. Your father, that was the most beautiful your, your father thought I was the most beautiful woman he have ever seen in his life. Once he finally met at the party, we were able to talk. He told me that my skin was like a cup of espresso. I explained to him that I have inherited my darkest color from my Spanish parents. I love your eyes, Miranda. He gusted at me. He said they look as green as the jungle, and he could see a wild animal in them. He also commented on how my lips were red as the fresh picked berries. He then stepped closer to me and realized my eyes were actually light brown and green. I laughed at him. I laughed at him for his honest mistake. He ended up spending the entire evening talking to each other and learning more and more about the other person. By the end of the evening, we both felt as though we have known each other for many, many years. Horatio was 16 years older than me, but despite our glaring age difference, we realized we have more in common with each other than with people our own age. My mother stopped her story, looked at me, and frowned. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She was comparing her relationship to the one I was now, and it wasn't good. I turned her I turned to her with a proud expression and said, Mother, let's not talk about what's now. I'm enjoying your story. Let's stick to the past for now before Holly wakes up. She looked at me resigned but held her tongue and continued. When I met your father, I knew right then that an older man was for me. I knew that he would want to settle down and have a family and not mess around as much as a younger man would. Your father and I began spending more time with each other, and eventually our friendship turned into something much more serious. Unfortunately, we had to meet secretly. As Horatio and I fell in love, I learned that my own parents had promised me to the son of the wealthy family in the neighboring village. When they learned about Horatio through the gossip of family friends, they forbade me to see him again. Of course, this did not stop us. We were too far gone then, and nothing besides death could have dealt a blow of our blossoming love. My parents' decree made my love for Horatio grow in leaps and bounds. He laughed aloud and I did too. I knew exactly how determined my parents were, and together they would be unstoppable. She continued her story, and the element of sneaking around and the possibility of getting caught only added another realm, excitement, and passion to our relationship. It was at this point that your father began to sing for me just like you do. Oh, I could sing when I was young. My mother touched my cheek with her elderly and dry hands. I rested my head on her shoulder. She adjusted herself in the chair and we both sat up. She returned to her story. As you know, your father played the guitar, and by the time I knew his singing voice well, and then I heard it traveling through the street. I would open my bedroom window and lie on the bed listening to his serenades as if they were tucking me tightly into the bed for the night. Even though we were apart, we were still bound together and joined sweetly by his wonderful music. Horatio and I were doomed, though, because the boy I was promised to, I was already building our matrimonial home. Everyone was in on the plan. But your father and I, when I learned of the arrangement, I was become furious and refused to be forced into such an ancient practice. My parents were unsympathetic and told me I would do what they said. There was no choice. I was given no option. Realizing we had no more other choice, Horatio and I knew we had to elope. One evening we were later was trying to go to sleep that night. I heard a light tapping from under my bedroom floor. As we have so many times in the past, your father snuck under the platform of the house and tapped the wooden floor above his head with a stone. I walked to the corner of my room and moved the small table which covered the small hole on the floor. I knelt down to hear your father better. Then, inspired, I, I tucked my finger through the hole and your father looped his own pinky around mine. She stopped her story to lock her own pinky finger with mine. As the result, my heart filled with joy. I thought how happy they were must feel at the time. She continued, your father and I repeated this ritual whenever we visited me under the floor. After we were married, because of our thing, we did it to show how much we love each other. The last time we did it was only a week before he died. 5 weeks after the pinky ritual and began, he whispered to me under the floor one night, tonight is the night, Miranda. Pack lightly, but bring what you need. I'll wait for you under the acacia tree. Without waiting for my consent, he was gone. I was not even sure what time he was coming back. Slow I slightly packed and what I would need for the honeymoon and new life with him. Tears streaked down my face and onto my hands as they held hers. My mother's body shook slightly and my heart was deeply sorry for her. I sat still, held her hands tightly and listened. She continued, I had anticipated the moment for weeks. I snatched 2 pillows and stuffed them with clothes and personal items. I left my room and looked down to the hall to peer up the stairs, then lead my parents' room. I walked and ran as fast as I could, not even looking behind me to see anyone was following me. My goal was to the tree. I ran faster and faster with the 2 pillowcases dragging behind me. As I got closer to the tree, I saw your father standing there, his face beaming with the sight of me, and I got up to him. He kissed me full on the lips and took a pillowcase from me, grabbing my hand and ran even faster to the bus station before anyone realized we had bolted away. Horatio had in time so that we were only the bus for 5 minutes before it fell away from the station. Taking vehicle as far as it traveled, we journeyed more than 200 kilometers over across the Diwata mountain where the road considerably uncomfortable. My mother laughed aloud at this memory, and I put my arms around her and look at the time. I was surprised to see that we've been talking for almost an hour now. The sun was getting quite hot above us. I looked over my mother and was surprised to see her crying. I realized then that she really felt overwhelmed by my father's assassination. I softly said to her, Mother, you can tell more of your story later in the day. She smiled and nodded. I knew it took a lot out of her talking to me like that. So many happy memories shattered by my father's meaningless death. She took my hands and gripped it tightly. I was surprised by her strength. I was just about to get up and continue her story. I guess that she just needed a good cry. She took a deep breath, polished off her tea, which must have been quite cold by now, and picked up her story from the last from where she had stopped. 1 year later, one minute before midnight on October 6, 1958, my first child was born. I was sure that we named her Maria Sophia Castillo Vega. You have your father's eyes, you lucky child. She smiled and laughed at me tightly as she could. She hugged me tightly as she could. I love you, mother, I told her. I love you more, she responded to me. We looked behind us, see my daughter Holly was now awake, and ran over to us for a hug. As I embraced my oldest daughter, I wonder what my parents was like when they were just starting out. At least they have each other. As of yet, I didn't have anyone that I could honestly share my life with. This is a really good story. Guys, at the moment, I can't really continue. My back is really like, bugging me. We'll continue again tomorrow, okay? And this is only 20 minutes, but at least, I read to you part of the most important things of my mother's memory about my father before the assassination, after the assassination. And I thank you very much, guys. I love you. Bye.